Yeah, you're muted. It says in the bottom corner you're muted.
Are we good now?
Yes. Welcome. So this is my great friend. How would you like to be referred to?
Techbrotito.
Yes, of course. Techbrotito, and we are just doing the second episode of the podcast ever. So thank you so much for being my guest. I really So I wanted to start with why, because obviously you're anonymous here on the podcast, and I wanted to know why you're anonymous. And I think it'd be a great thing to start with some of your background and what you experienced in San Francisco and kind of why.
Well, again, to start, of course, Techbrotito, who's Techbrotito? Josip Broz Tito was dictator of Yugoslavia, managed to fight off both Hitler as well as Stalin to preserve neutrality of country. Important thing, obviously, he dies in 1980. I'm, of course, resurrected by San Francisco technology, Calico, and many startups. So experience in San Francisco, of course, comes from experience in tech world there. In terms of why anonymity matters, well, in communist state, which is what I ran, you don't have anonymity. The point of anonymity in places of quote unquote free America is the idea that you can speak freely and try out new ideas without being canceled for it. Your founding fathers, for instance, used the Federalist Papers, for instance, to argue, taking on personas of ancient Greek characters, to argue for or against policies so that they could be assessed on the policy rather than on the merit of the character and without being canceled.
Absolutely. And yeah, like if you express certain opinions these days, people just get really upset and they might try to ruin your life in one way or another.
Well, so problem with this conversation, right? It comes from the sort of Joe Rogan radical moderate wing. And the problem is this: cancellation happens one way only. This way is if you contradict the line essentially of people have many names for it, but wokeness maybe works to understand, but basically going against a particular side. And this again happens to be called the pro-Ukraine side right now. There's many different issues, but the point is simply, there's one side that will cancel. So if I'm, not pro-Ukraine, let's say, and again, it's very complicated. That's my area of the world as Josip Broz Tito. Very complicated. If I don't take Ukrainian side, though clearly I'm a pro-Putin puppet, I get canceled. You look at Russia being canceled. Whereas people on the Russian side, on the Trump side, on the other side, there is not cancellation. They don't cancel things. They don't get people fired. They don't fight. So it's a big difference to say, well, some people may cancel, never know the opinion. No. That is, in fact, getting past the point. The point is very simple. One side destroys, one side wrecks, and one side will always fight, and one side will turn up its belly like big yellow dog asking for belly rub, even after you kick it repeatedly.
Wow. That's profound.
This is why you featured me, no?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, I guess we can just get into the first topic idea, which is gun control.
Which is which one?
Gun control. We had talked about guns and gun control, and you were educating me because I know nothing to very little about that subject. So maybe let's talk about, in general, gun control and how you feel about it.
Right. Well, again, there's two ways to look at it, of course. One is as authoritarian, autocratic leader of country that wishes to reduce violence in multi-ethnic population that, of course, leads to the Yugoslav wars with full ethnic cleansing not seen in Europe since World War II. I managed to forestall such, and it became absolutely bloody. Literally, people taking down their pants after being taken off of a bus at gunpoint, and then being told to see if they were circumcised. Muslims are circumcised, and Christians are not. The same ethnic population, Slavic people, same color, same ethnicity. However, those who had cut penises, i.e., foreskins were removed at birth because they were Muslim, they would be executed. And this would happen the other way as well. So ethnic cleansing happened. So again, Yugoslavia had this gun control. However, the United States is a more interesting example. One of the more interesting things to understand about the United States is the foundation of the United States really dates back to attempts to resist gun control. Very misunderstood point. So everyone knows Paul Revere, or the Israel guy who tried to say the British are coming, correct? You're familiar?
Yes.
What were they coming to do? To have a tea party, to invite them to the Queen's office? What were they coming to do exactly?
Yeah, they were coming to, I don't know exactly what. I just know.
Absolutely. No, and most people don't. They don't teach this thing. It's not important, and it's politically, it's not politically correct, and it is not convenient. So it's not exactly gun control, but it is related to the elements of gun control. And so specifically, it was known as the powder alarm. Powder alarm was this. Firearms back in past were basically giant tube. You load gunpowder in, wadding, and you have a lead projectile, correct? Anyways, the thing is, metallurgy was not very advanced at this time. And so making a gun or substituting guns wasn't that hard. Gunpowder, though, very difficult, very difficult. And so the British were coming to confiscate gunpowder. And so specifically, they set up a thing called the powder alarm to let people know that the British were coming to confiscate gunpowder, which was the hardest to get element essentially because you consume it every time you fire it. And the chemical processes to actually make such a thing happen were actually rather difficult and rather dangerous, as we say, kaboom. So they came to warn them that the British were coming to hide the gunpowder and to fight to preserve the gunpowder. This is what kicks off your entire Revolutionary War.
I can't believe I didn't know that.
Yeah, and more interestingly, DuPont family, very famous for Kevlar and other chemicals and all that. DuPont family makes family fortune off of synthesizing and creating domestic gunpowder production to keep America from being canceled by arms producing nations that may not give gunpowder to America. Very important. One of the oldest families in America, one of the largest and longest lived family fortunes in America, dates back to keeping Americans able to arm themselves. So yeah, it's very important. Again, most Americans say, "Oh, I'm so smart." All these, they don't know their history. They don't know it as well as someone from Yugoslavia.
Right. What was the name of that family again?
DuPont, D-U-P-O-N-T.
Oh, wow.
Yes, you've heard of them. You should have heard. Everyone should hear. Big family, important. So, anyways, the point about gun control, essentially, as I bring up here, right, is that America was founded on resisting gun control from the very get-go, and it was founded essentially on the idea, essentially, of creating domestic gun production and other things, so that such supply constraints wouldn't be issue. Same thing sort of happens when you get into larger armaments. The South attempts to get vessels of war during Civil War. The North cuts them off, and you only have essentially shipbuilders in Europe that can build the top of the line ships of the day called ironclads. They negotiate early days in the war, things go against South, and then the European states decide not to deliver, essentially, or very much delay, and so essentially they're unarmed by it. American Indian Wars in America, these essentially are fought by combatants that everyone agrees that the American Indian was a better fighter, stronger, taller, just better in every aspect, man for man, compared to American soldier. America obviously ends up winning, though. This is because of logistics and outnumbering, and because American Indian tribes simply do not have access to powder supply. Wow. So they have empty guns.
Right. Amazing.
So you had specific questions, though, say about California law, about attempts to create gun control, how difficult or strange it is. Lead me to where it was exactly. I just answered questions. I don't really have diatribe in me. It's just what I know.
Yeah. So I remember asking you, can I just buy a gun in Nevada? Because that's closer. I don't think there are any gun shops nearby. And I remember you laughing.
Oh, you would need a few more years. Specifically, you would need to go back in time prior to the assassination of Kennedy for this to be possible. So Kennedy's death actually led to not the first gun control, but I'd call the first modern gun control. And so specifically, his shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald, buys a gun through a magazine and was shipped to door. And this used to be a normal thing. You receive your Sears and Roebuck catalog. There's toilets, there's wrenches, there's light switches, there's light bulbs, and there's rifles, military surplus rifles from the war. And you can buy it. It's delivered to door, no problem. This is how he gets the rifle, and of course, the 1960, I believe it's 1963, they passed gun control, 68, excuse me, I believe. I believe is sort of the first thing, and you have to sort of generally buy guns in state. I believe that is maybe the origin of the first real restrictions on handguns versus rifles. The answer is no, you can't, because they wish to be able to track you more. And this leads, of course, into something I'm more familiar with, which is the police state that America is and that people are unaware of.
Yes, we were talking about this last night. The fact that it's illegal to not report running your car into a rock.
Right. Or other things. If it's on private property, it's fine. If it's not, and it's actually a big damage on the other hand, then yes, you must report this. And this becomes insurance fraud if you do not, which of course leads to very heavy penalties and sanctions. So most people are unaware of this and they don't have enforcement mechanisms yet for such, but that doesn't mean that the law and the principle is not there to later be clamped down upon when they have the ability to.
Right. My guess is that most people listening to this right now have done something like that, run into something with their car and not reported it.
Right. And he goes, there's a man who wrote a book, 3 felonies a day, estimating there's, the average person commits about 3 felonies per day. You get into very complex arguments about such things. There's supposed to be no centralized measure or count of how many federal laws there are, something over 5,000 is was last count. It's just very complicated. But ultimately, it has to do with control matrix and people not having the ability to enforce it. And I will just engage in what's known as Irish democracy. Irish democracy essentially is the idea of being a bunch of lawbreakers who refuse to abide by law, and there's just so many of you, you overwhelm system. So you can see it as people power, other things like that. Problem with people power, problem with Irish democracy. The Irish were oppressed for hundreds of years and had things like the penal laws imposed upon them where they could not receive higher education. And only through force of arms and killing British and blowing people up in England did any real progress start to be made, depending on how you measure it. The idea of sort of peaceful resolutions and all that comes from Gandhi and comes from the civil rights movement. But there's a lot more to that, and frankly, a lot more to be skeptical about actually working for normal people. So, but that's getting off of another subject. Back to gun control in California.
Yeah.
So with gun control in California, simple thing to understand is it's a escalating arms race, no pun intended, between those who wish to ban firearms and those who wish to have them and to practice with them however they please. So perfect example with the handgun thing. So the reason you want to buy handgun in Nevada is it would be cheaper, better selection, many different things, including easier access to it. Problem is, in California, you must buy gun from a licensed dealer. Even if you buy it, if I was California resident selling to you, we would actually have to go to a special shop. We would have to get them to both check IDs, run background checks on you and I, to pay the DROS fee, dealer records of sale fee, and sometimes other fees as well. And then after everything checks out, which it doesn't necessarily check out immediately. The handgun, or specifically handgun or rifle, needs to sit in a box for 10 days. You're not allowed to take possession for 10 days.
Wow. I mean, to me, that feels crazy. That feels like way too much regulation of commerce. But then people would come to you and say, well, that's a safety regulation. This is supposed to make people safe. What would you say to that?
Well, again, so there's two. This is the problem, and this is why I have much contempt for regular, call them conservatives, call them right-wing, call them whatever you will in America. But I have nothing but contempt for such. And it's not merely because I come from communist country. I have contempt for such because the argument here is to bring up the idea of quote unquote states' rights. Oh, we support states' rights. California wants to be crazy. Why does it affect me in Texas? Why does it affect me in Alaska? If I'm in Missouri, if I'm in New Jersey, we should live by different laws, live and let live, blah, 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 blah.
Well, if I may, I think one example of that not being the case is that California implements laws and then other places follow suit.
Yes, but you could still see this as, will they voluntarily take them up? So there's many laws in Hawaii, for instance, that are largely based off California law, copy and paste. Gun control law, specifically Massachusetts' safe handgun roster, comes from California. New Jersey's cribbed a lot. And then, frankly, most nationwide gun control measures generally usually look at California legislation over New York, Hawaii, New Jersey, the other gun banning states. But again, this is voluntary association. And the problem with the right is they say, well, as long as it's voluntary, I don't care. But the issue with that is, again, one side wishes to impose upon the other side does not. And the thing is, the thing is, once you have an army marching, once you have a movement, people that are passively sitting and saying, I would just want to be left alone, simply don't have the ability to stop it. It doesn't matter if you're in Belgium and you have no dispute with Germany when they want to march to France. If France is here, Belgium is here, and Germany is here, guess what that means if Germany wants to get into France? Guess what that means?
Yeah.
Germany has to rule. That is how it works. I don't make laws. I don't make physics. It is how it works. Same thing with Balkans. The Balkan areas have been continuous stomping grounds. Same thing with Ukraine. Ukraine is a flat area, produces much wheat. And if you wish to get to Russia or Asia, much transits through there. This is why Ukraine is so important. It's because of location. So to simplify, to sum up essentially, the issue quite simply is, when it comes to things that essentially one side wants, like say abortion is legal everywhere. If you repeal Roe v. Wade, it does not outlaw abortion. It merely allows states to outlaw it within their own provinces. This is considered to be a red line, considered to be major fight and culture war. This is considered to be major. But the thing is, the left treats this in the same way that the right would treat. And again, these are outdated labels, but for simplification, to make it understood, the left treats the idea of states being able to choose as the same equivalent as the right does of having national gun control enforcing things on their state. And that's the thing. Quite simply, one side is more aggressive, wishes to take ground, wishes to impose their will on the others, and the other side doesn't. And when you have that, ultimately what that means is, if you fight 1,000 battles, you win 999 of them, but you lose one. If you refuse to take territory, that means that even if you lose one battle, whatever ground was lost in that battle is lost, period, to the other side. You can't make gains unless you destroy the opposition, or you make them give up being opposition, or you make them decide to leave everyone alone. And they have to choose to leave everyone alone. If they don't, they get to continue to pick fight with you.
I mean, but that sounds very aggressive.
War is war. I come from Eastern Europe. You think I have illusions about war? Do you think I have illusions about keeping together a multi-ethnic Yugoslavian empire? Again, was very difficult. Hitler marched through, Stalin tries to take over country. Do you think I managed to keep Yugoslavia independent by being flowers and puppies and not being aggressive? This is not how the world works. Maybe it works for consumer capitalist, Starbucks sipping sipping conservatives, or they don't sip Starbucks, they're the Black Rifle coffee, or perhaps they maybe finally canceled them. But when you want to sip your coffee and you want to say, oh, I don't wish to be aggressive or impose my will on other people, even though they're going to do it to me, I don't wish to disarm them, destroy them, and make them think twice about it, then of course they're going to continue aggressive against you. Why wouldn't they? Someone that's aggressive will continue to be aggressive until you make them stop. And if you're not willing to make them stop, you are declaring, continue to commit war against me. The worst I will do is just hold you back. If you continue to try to hit me in the head, if all I do is dodge your blows, you'll probably eventually hit me. Law of averages. And then what do I do?
That's a great point. This kind of brings up for me you saying that about like you can't just resist someone and like push them back while they're trying to hit you and expect them to stop. It kind of reminded me about the Kyle Rittenhouse thing. And I remember reaching out to you when I first saw some videos and saw the testimony, and I expressed at the time a pretty controversial opinion, maybe it still is, that kid's a hero, and what an amazing kid to go out and do what he was doing. And I think for people who don't have context, which is probably most people, they would be shocked and so offended at that opinion. But if you go in and look at what happened and look at the video footage, look at the testimony, it becomes very clear that he was there very peacefully. He just happened to have a gun, and he only used it for self-defense against people who were wildly aggressive to him. Not only did he only do that, but there was someone who hit him in the head with a skateboard and continued to chase him, who he did not shoot because he didn't feel that person was a threat.
Right. So Rittenhouse, starts to wake people up to needing to understand defense. But the problem is people celebrate Rittenhouse as a true victory. The very fact that someone in this kind of context is brought up on charges, needs to raise millions of dollars for legal defense for such a case as this, demonstrates fact. And then after fact, I'm not sure you've heard this, but you address people in person, someone who wants to be a radical moderate will say, yes, but why was he there though? If he wasn't there, there wouldn't be fight. And the answer is because he has a right to. How dare you say that 17-year-old does not have right to defend himself and that businesses must be burnt down when police refuse to do job, when other things, when police refuse to do job, when society refuses to uphold property rights or to uphold things previously agreed to in law. And then little man of 17 decides to actually take law at its word and to actually follow law as best he can. Then you accuse him of making error. You simply have no principles, sir. You have no principles except, well, as long as there isn't conflict, no matter how aggressive the other side is, they win. It is the same principle behind zero tolerance in schools. If I hit you and you're suspended, all I need to do is get 5 of my friends to hit you, and then we separate punishment 1/5 between us. I receive 20% or 1/5 of punishment used, and if we get suspended at the same rate, you take 5 times that. I can flunk you out of school by missing more days of school. Say it's 20 days of school. If I miss 4 days of school and I have 4 other friends to miss 4 days of school, we can make you flunk out due to no fault of your own, while we get to stay in school.
Yeah.
Simple logic, simple strategy that no one wants to confront, because the game theory says that then essentially if you're being attacked by someone like that, if you're being attacked by a gang of people that wish to cancel you, wish to push you out, then the only response is in fact an aggressive response.
So can we talk about your experience being aggressed against? Because you were physically harmed.
Well, so I can speak of Yugoslavia. As far as actual biographical details of myself that are not Brotito, I prefer to obscure such things that have happened since my resurrection in America. So I can say, for instance, I have been, for instance, at some of these political activities in the streets, and I have personally met force with force when aggressed upon. And the issue, of course, is I myself was asked, well, why were you there? And the answer is because it's a free society. And if you're saying I have no right to be there, you are removing my freedom from society and taking away what the left likes to call the tragedy of the commons. You are taking away my common grounds, my ability to assemble, which is, a First Amendment protected activity. Well, the police should protect you. Well, they didn't protect me. Now what? Well, maybe the police can't protect you because it costs too much. Well, there's no cost to that. And simply what you're saying is then if police won't protect me, then logically speaking, militia has a right to take law into their own hands to enforce against that, because the neutral arbiters, the police, will not do so. So then thus by process of elimination, you're either saying I must bend over, lose my rights, or I have full moral authority to bring militia and provide my own protection. Which is it? No one wants to answer that because they just want conflict gone, and they ultimately want to reward one side, which they're used to being able to get their way.
Do you know, have there been any examples of people bringing a militia to some event like that in order to sort of reduce violence, and how was that received?
Right. So controversial topic. You want to go controversial, I go controversial, not because I wish to, but because best example is controversial. There was a meeting in Charlottesville, Virginia. It was known as Unite the Right. I am somewhat familiar with the situation. I will not go into how I am familiar with it. Suffice to say, I am more familiar than the average person with it. Unite the Right was an idea of uniting moderate right-wing people with very far right and what was known as the alt-right and still is known as the alt-right. So as people will say, Nazis, fascists, other things like these. So the idea was that you don't punch right, to go back to that thing. So they decided to assemble specifically, though, not to just speak, but to prevent taking down the statue of Stonewall Jackson. Or excuse me, not Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee. There was a statue to Robert E. Lee in Virginia, his birthplace. Most people don't know Arlington National Cemetery, where we put all our dead U.S. servicemen, was actually from farm of Robert E. Lee that was taken at the signing of Appomattox. And in fact, so the final resting place of American heroes or American servicemen, however you call it, lies on the land of the leader of the Confederate Army. He's incredibly important to Virginia history, rightly or wrongly. All you can do is destroy history rather than deny facts. So they wanted to take, they were saying they need to take down the statue of Robert E. Lee. And so there was a bunch of people that wanted to defend it. Not just right-wing people, not just Nazis, not just fascists, but people, Southerners, many are just historians or just people that disagree with destroying public art or removing it. So the two sides basically had to fight over this, and the Unite the Right rally was saying, well, regardless of what it is, perhaps we need to be able to unite for a common goal of being able to protect statue. This led to the original meeting was set for Saturday. They ended up having a torch march on Friday night on, I believe, University of Virginia grounds. This has very famous video covered by Vice Reporter, and they chant things that you will not replace us, and then chant, at least in some scattered pockets, turns to Jews will not replace us. And so it becomes, cast as very anti-Semitic, and fully everyone that's a Nazi with torches. This is just how the media after the fact casts it, regardless of truth. So continuing, there's the actual rally, and this is to address your point. Sorry for going off on tangents.
Hey.
The actual meeting did happen on Saturday. They were to hold it into a park. Now, what I actually have been told directly is that what happened is they were actually blocked from entering park by police. Police said you can't enter park, and they said, well, we have permits, we did everything correctly, we filed ahead of time, we did all this, we paid, we have speakers fees. I believe it was a man named the name escapes me now, but it was all properly done, which is uncommon for right wing. And then the police blocked them and said you have to go back the way you came. What happens is left wing, the sort of counter protesters, the protesters against the the march to preserve statues, then closed in, boxed them in. They said, well, you're going to push us through the lines of them, and we're going to have to fight our way out. And police said, too bad, go. So they were forced through these crowds. They were forced back through hostile other people that outnumbered them. Now, they brought many shields. They brought many sticks and other things such as this, helmets, etc., etc. I know for a fact there were in fact militias with weaponry, not right there, but stationed nearby, so that if they needed to respond with lethal force, they could. This did not come into play. This mostly stayed at the sub-lethal level generally. I believe there was one gunshot recorded on film. There were several beatings and all that. There's been many charges for Charlottesville. It's still a very seminal event. What happens is ultimately people mostly get out. There's injuries and all that, but people get out. And then most famously, a few hours later, there's a young man who attended the rally. He's in Dodge Challenger. He's driving around. Again, there's dispute about whether or not he was lost, whether he was trying to escape, whether he was confused about where to go in the city. I believe he was from Ohio, so not from Virginia. And what we have on video is of him reversing car and then accelerating into a crowd of people, leading to the death of Heather Heyer. And so this of course is very famous incident, and led to big Charlottesville trial that put many personalities on trial, many organizations to bankrupt. I believe judgment was something on order of 24 million total between different organizations. Even though, if I recall correctly, penalty in Virginia is statutorily limited to 500,000 per offense. This was well over that. So again, it is still in litigation. I have no informed legal comments to make on such that would be worthy of podcast. But point is, people did show up. They did that. What happens is, guns are not good counter, and you can't shoot someone that's unarmed or someone that has less than that level. And so people fought their way out, essentially hand to hand, in some degree of shields and sticks. There was one incident of a pistol being shot and missing people, and I believe there was one gentleman who used a improvised torch of an aerosol can with a match to shoot fire at someone. I believe that's what led to the person shooting pistol at him. Anyways, completely irrelevant. Mag lights and all this kind of stuff for beatdowns. So the point is, yes, this has been done. The problem is there's a difference between physical capacity and the morality, being allowed to, having it be considered okay. So perfect example, Kyle Rittenhouse spends something like $2 million plus on defense. There was a man named Matthew Dolliff, excuse me. Matthew Dolliff was working for Pinkerton Detective Agency. Pinkerton Detective Agency has long history breaking up labor, shooting labor activists. This was in Denver. There was a Trump rally in 2021. 2020, maybe 2020, excuse me.
All right, real quick. I wanted to know, do you know the figure of how much the other side of the Rittenhouse trial ended up spending?
Well, that's the beauty of it. They're prosecutors. It's all public money.
Right.
So tax dollars. Yeah, I'm sure I could pull up fees, but the point is it didn't cost them anything, because they just raise taxes. It doesn't come out of their pockets. It comes out of everyone, regardless of which side you're on. It came out of everyone's pockets that lives there as a taxpayer. So again, if you have the other people paying for it, you can obviously last much longer because you're not paying for it. So important thing. But anyways, back to case. So if you contrast Kyle Rittenhouse, what he spent, so then you have the case of Lee Keltner, who was a hat maker, who was at Trump rally. He had a can of bear spray in hand. And there was a guy who was acting in security, turns out unlicensed, for a news reporter. He's trying to push way through crowd and all this. And what happens is Lee Keltner, I believe, on video, you can see him slap the guy with an open hand. And the guy backs up a bit. He pulls pistol, shoots Lee Keltner right in head, and he drops right there. He's dead, literally before he hits ground. And so what happens is the prosecution announced they dropped case for Matthew Doloff because they said they don't believe they could overcome his self-defense claim. So you have Kyle Rittenhouse attacked as he was, that kind of stuff. And this is one person versus another. Guy slaps this guy who's working security. The guy working security backs up. The Lee Keltner raises pepper spray, raises pepper spray, and again, it's considered a less lethal agent or non-lethal agent, depending on who you talk to. It's considered non-lethal. It's considered to be, again, non-lethal force, generally speaking. He raises that, and then he's shot in the head by a man with a Glock that has special optical sight, so you can aim incredibly accurately, quickly when you train with it. So you can hit him in the head and kill him before he even hits ground. So they announced they were dropping all charges. They didn't believe they could overcome it, and virtually no dollars spent. So you can see the asymmetry of the conflict. One side to get one guy off in this situation, attacked by multiple attackers, admittedly well, there was a firearm, clutched by Gage Grosskreutz guy who had his bicep blown off. So you see one side that actually fights guns with guns, and skateboards multiple attackers with a rifle. Has to spend millions and millions of dollars, and this is considered a success for their side. Whereas the other side shoots a man who doesn't have a firearm on him at all. He gets shot in the head, and that's considered to be clear-cut self-defense. No money need to be spent. So when I say things that are lopsided, I say, what's your answer to a lopsided question?
Yeah. So is there a solution that you see to this, a potential solution?
My friend, you invite me on because you think I have much wisdom and much knowledge, and perhaps I know a thing or two that you do not. In terms of wisdom, though, you must understand. Tito did not manage to get where he did by keeping hands clean. He did not get where he was, and did not keep power and keep things relatively prosperous and peaceful by just letting things go. He literally raised a partisan force. And what is a partisan? A partisan is your militia, except their entire dedication is to do assassinations, essentially. He led these successful partisans to fight Nazis on his territory, leading to horrific assassinations, and again, horrific reprisals, and horrific back and forth tit for tat bloodletting. This later, of course, is what takes over Yugoslavia after he dies, 10 years old. But everyone agrees, essentially, Tito managed to keep it from ever being a potential, and after he died, pretty much everyone knew it was a ticking time bomb, and Yugoslavia would go the way it did with ethnic cleansing and mass executions. I don't come to bear peace. I don't come to bear a good centrist solution for you. All I can simply say is there's only two choices. One is to acquiesce to one side, to allow yourself to be taken over because they've said nothing less than submission is what we wish. You must submit. The other is to fight, regardless of cost, regardless of consequences. And if the person you're fighting will not give up fight, to continue to fight until they literally can no longer harm you. And that itself means you need to take away their ability to harm you, to have political influence enough to do so, and to do those things. It's very nasty business. I don't know what to say. People don't understand that, when people say that America was born in blood and that we have, white privilege or, the blood of slaves and all that, they leave out the blood of American Indians. But they also, and then people that criticize Israel for the bloodletting of Palestinians today. But they also forget the bloodletting necessary to create the foundation of the State of Israel. Everything from the Stern Gang, Irgun, to the Haganah, to the King David bombing, to the Sergeant's affair, to the birth of Ukraine. People don't want to deal with Stefan Bandera, who he's famous for raising what's known as Azov Battalion in Ukraine. Azov Battalion is inspired by human rights sector as well. And what are these groups? These are ethnic Ukrainian groups that mass murdered Jews, mass murdered Poles, mass murdered people that were not Ukrainians, not just Jews, but also Poles. Many Poles died, were executed in horrific massacres. Stalin himself killed many to do this kind of thing. Coherence of a territory, coherence of a thing when one side won't give up is a bloody affair. I simply don't have much good news to bear, and so I don't think I will be the most popular guest or popular answerer for you, unfortunately, my friend.
Well, it's, in a way, it's almost good to hear that answer, because I don't think anyone actually has an answer. So that was a tough question, and I appreciate that.
Da.
You know,
It's people forget in the wake of the Revolutionary War. Essentially you have loyalists. Up to 1/3 of loyalists end up going to Canada. I believe going to the Caribbean, actually, because life is made so intolerable for supporting the wrong side during war. So much for freedom, for vaunted American freedom of yours. This is what happens in the wake of the resolution of the Civil War. Famously, when you look into it, you have Reconstruction. Reconstruction was forcing political choices that South was not ready for. They fought it vigorously, and this leads to very bloody campaigns. This leads to the foundation of the KKK. This leads to the Redeemers, even bloodier than KKK. And finally, this leads to them to a deal to abandon trying to enforce northern norms on the South. And this leads to bloody political repression. In the wake of World War I, Germans become public enemies. And so you have many places named Germantown. You find those in Philadelphia, Tennessee, in Memphis, Tennessee, many other places. The German identity is essentially liquidated because Germans are considered to be ethnic enemies. In the wake of World War II, same thing applies. Many courageous generation would not buy German-made cars. There were books literally written, Germany must perish. And you have things like the Morgenthau Plan, which called for the deaths of at least 12 million Germans to pastoralize, to make Germany a large farm, to destroy all industry. So it was farm. So that literally there would be no ability to feed enough people. So at least 12 million would die. It's not fun. People don't like to look at these things. People are very much trained to look in a positive sum game. I come from part of the world where everything is zero-sum game. Perhaps I am too pessimistic, but it is not perspective given to Americans enough.
Wow. Well, honestly, I think that was dense enough, and that was a great amount of chat. So I think we should cut it off there.
If you wish to have more focused podcast, simply figure out which questions you want to ask. I go off various directions. I don't really pre-prepare any of these. I don't have prepared remarks. I could, instead of speaking sort of off the cuff, but I wasn't asked for that. So if you want a more in-depth explanation of California gun laws and what the back and forth and the sort of arms race and all that, I'm happy to go into that. I just sort of need to know exactly which direction you wish to go.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Здоровья.
Here, I got to figure out how to